Tatyana Mikhailovna sat by the window in the gray morning light, clutching an old cell phone whose screen was cracked and unresponsive. The battery was long dead, but she held onto it as though expecting a miracle each time she glanced at it. A lace-curtained window framed the view of a narrow street lined with aging apartment blocks. Below, a few people shuffled to work, their faces withdrawn, shoulders hunched against the lingering chill. On the small table beside her lay a lopsided teapot, half-chipped from years of service, and a single, half-burned candle. The scent of chamomile tea mixed with faint traces of stale cigarette smoke, a remnant from her husband's habitual pipe. She wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her frail shoulders, dismissing the cold as a minor inconvenience compared to the emptiness she felt. The last call from her son, Andrei, was 3 months ago. He had sounded rushed, apologetic, and distant. "Mom, I'm sorry I can't talk long. Big project at work, client dinners every night. Eleni needs help with the baby. I'll call soon, I promise. Love you." Her daughter, Elna, who had moved to London 5 years ago, sent postcards once a year, often late. The last one depicted the Thames at dawn, water gray under a cloudy sky, with a short note scribbled, "Mom, thinking of you. Work is hectic. Baby's due any day. We'll send money for the bathroom soon. Stay well." But the money never came, and the bathroom remained in disrepair. A single card, yellowed at the edges, sat on the windowsill. "Mommy, stay strong. Love you." Signed in shaky cursive. The apartment itself was a museum of neglect. The ceiling had developed water stains from a leaky roof, the wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the furniture sagged as though weary of supporting memories. A faded photograph on the mantelpiece showed Tatyana and her husband Viktor smiling at their wedding 50 years ago. Their joy, frozen in sepia tones, contrasted sharply with her solitude. When neighbors asked how she was, she would smile and say, "I'm fine. The kids are busy. They love me. They just can't come." Inwardly, she wondered whether they truly loved her, or if their promises were merely polite illusions. Each night she would lie awake, listening to the building's pipes creak and the faint hum of distant traffic. Sometimes in the darkness she would imagine Andrei rushing through a rainstorm to call her, or Elena dropping everything to hug her. When the silence persisted, her chest tightened and she reached for her husband's old pipe, lighting it even though she hadn't smoked in years, just for a wisp of memory. Summer afternoons found Tatyana in her small balcony garden, carefully tending a few pots of petunias and basil. The balcony overlooked a courtyard where a solitary birch tree swayed. She often spoke to the plants, whispering stories of Viktor and the children as though they were old friends. In August, the tomatoes ripened into warm orbs of red. She plucked one and set it on the windowsill, thinking of Andrei's favorite salad. She half expected him to appear, tie a towel around his waist, and ask for the knife. A battered garden stool leaned against the railing. On it, she placed a worn-out gardening journal, where she had written down planting dates, weather patterns, and little notes. June 5th, morning cool, children laughing in yard. June 10th, Viktor taught Andrei to tie shoes. The entries dated back 3 decades. One afternoon, as she pruned a dead stem, a memory of her wedding day flooded back. Viktor, in a crisp uniform, peeling a petty coin from his pocket to buy a single blossom for her bouquet. The memory made her smile and choke back tears. That evening, she retrieved an old Polaroid album. The pages crackled as she turned them, revealing images of a bright-eyed Andrei with his first bike and Elena holding a broken doll that Tatyana had sewn a new dress for. In the final pages, Viktor's face looked gaunt in a hospital bed, hooked to tubes, as Tatyana held his hand and whispered promises she couldn't keep. In one photograph, young Tatyana and Viktor stood beside a newly built summer cottage, wooden walls gleaming. Viktor pointed toward a field of wildflowers, saying, "Someday, our children will run through here, and the laughter will fill every corner." The picture made her fingers tremble. Rewind 20 years to a crisp autumn evening. The young Andrei stumbled into the house, cheeks pink from crisp air, and exclaimed, "Mama, look! I caught a lizard." He held a tiny green lizard in his palms, and Tatyana laughed, catching the creature just before it scurried away into a corner. That evening, Viktor arrived home looking unusually solemn, coat hung carefully in the hallway. He had returned from the factory where he worked as a mechanic. His shoes were caked in grease, and his face bore the exhaustion of a man who had worked too long and too hard. At dinner, over a table of steaming borscht and fresh rye bread, he broached a conversation neither Tatyana nor the children expected. "I need to take a business trip next week. The manager in Moscow asked me to help fix a machine. I'm sorry it's so sudden." Tatyana looked at him, puzzled. "But it's the bee harvest weekend. We promised the neighbors we'd swap honey and jam." He placed a hand over hers, eyes heavy. "This is important. They need me. I'll be back soon." Elena, barely 8 at the time, stared wide-eyed. "In time for my recital?" She was learning the flute, and the recital was the following evening. "I'll try, sweetheart. I'll try." Viktor had hugged her tightly, smelling of motor oil and caramel from the candy he snuck into his pocket for her. That was the last time he walked into the cottage looking whole. A week later, Tatyana received a call at dawn. Viktor's car had collided with a passing train. He died instantly. The world tilted. Tatyana collapsed, hands pressed against her face as the phone slipped from her grasp. Andrei, only 10 and unaware of the nature of death, stared at his mother with wide eyes, not fully understanding. Viktor's funeral was gray and cold. The guests wore black, and the sky wept with the same heartache. Tatyana threw herself into grief, months passing in a blur of tears and silence. She held on to Viktor's empty jacket, laying it across the bed each night as though he might step into it any moment. The impact on the children was profound. Andrei, once cheerful and boisterous, became subdued, wandering the house looking through the windows as if waiting for his father's return. Elena drew pictures of her father in heaven, a halo around his head, forever playing with clouds. Financial strain followed. Viktor's meager salary had supplemented her income as a part-time librarian. Now, with medical bills mounting and funeral costs unpaid, Tatyana struggled to keep the apartment. Over the years, as Andrei and Elena grew, their lives diverged from Tatyana's small world. Andrei's path. Andrei was a diligent student, gifted in mathematics and mechanics. He earned a scholarship to study engineering in St. Petersburg. With a small suitcase and a head full of dreams, he departed one September morning, promising to call every week. At first he did. He described grand lecture halls, snow-drifted streets, and new friends who shared his passion for machines. But as semesters passed, his calls grew shorter. Test scores, internships, and late-night study sessions became excuses. One winter, he stopped calling altogether, citing exams and poor reception. Tatyana, waiting by the phone each evening, told herself he was simply busy. After graduation, Andrei secured a job in Novosibirsk at a promising startup. He worked 18-hour days, sending occasional text messages. He married a woman named Irina, whom Tatyana met only once over a video call. The screen froze halfway through dinner, and the memory flickered. Elena's journey. Elena, gifted with a pen and a curious mind, dreamed of becoming a journalist. She won a contest and secured an internship at a magazine in Moscow. After a year, she landed a coveted position in London. She called from Heathrow Airport, her voice tinged with excitement and guilt. "Mom, it's amazing here. I'll come home for New Year, I promise." "London is wonderful." The baby is due in May, and Michael is so supportive. Michael, Elena's fiancé and later husband, was a soft-spoken Englishman with kind eyes. Tatyana remembered the day he flew to Russia to formally ask for her daughter's hand. He brought a pot of tea from Harrods and said in broken Russian, "I love Elena, and I wish to take care of her." That was the last time Tatyana saw Elena in person. In May, on a warm, sunny day, a baby girl, Natalia, arrived, and photos streamed in. Sleepy, newborn yawns, tiny hands wrapped around Michael's finger. Tatyana's joy was tempered by the distance. She texted congratulations, but the reply was often delayed, buried under a pile of pings. After the children moved out, Tatyana's apartment echoed with silence. The hallway mirror reflected a solitary figure. She still set 2 plates at the table, turning around mid-meal as if expecting a familiar laugh. The second plate, cold and untouched, stared back. Mornings became routine: wake at 6, make oatmeal, radio news at 7. She listened to the old Soviet jazz station, chuckling at the host's outdated jokes. She folded laundry, dusted the bookshelves, and watered her balcony garden. One Saturday afternoon, she decided to clean Viktor's study. The door creaked open to reveal piles of mechanical sketches and journals. She ran her fingers over the drawings of engines he never built. A small jerry-rigged prototype lay on the desk. She recalled Viktor's dream of inventing a low-cost water pump for rural communities. Now, the dusty machine was destined for the trash. Instead of discarding it, she took it to the kitchen table and began cleaning it with a damp cloth. The act felt sacred, like paying homage. Lida Petrovna lived next door on the balcony level above. She visited almost daily, carrying an empty sack for groceries or fresh pastries from the bakery. She was a small, sprightly woman with silver hair tucked into a floral scarf and bright eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning, Tanyusha. I brought milk and rye bread. The bakery's having a Sunday sale." Tatyana welcomed her warmly, grateful for any human contact. They shared tea and rye bread, and Lida often teased her into taking short walks to the nearby bench under the linden trees. "Look, the church across the street has a new bell. They're painting the steeple. Isn't it beautiful?" Tatyana smiled, though her heart felt heavy. She hadn't been to church since Viktor's funeral. Lida confessed one evening, as they sat on the bench, "I used to have a daughter like you. She went to America after marriage. Called 3 times a year, if that. I haven't seen her in years, but we keep in touch. It's not the same, but..." She paused, eyes glistening. "It's all we have." Tatyana nodded, thinking of Elena's baby. She wondered what it felt like to be overseas, to chase dreams while feeling roots loosen beneath your feet. Over the next 12 months, life flowed past Tatyana like a slow river. Days blurred. She tried writing letters once more, but the post office mishandled the envelopes, sending them back marked undeliverable. In autumn, she attempted to bake a cake. The kitchen kettle whistled, and the sweet smell of vanilla and cinnamon filled the small space. She set the cake on the table, lit candles for her birthday, and whispered a wish. "If only you could come back, even for a day." She blew out the candles alone. Winter came with brittle frost. She wore layers to stay warm, but her bones ached. One early morning, the cupboard door swung open as she reached for cereal. She stumbled, hitting her head on the corner of the counter. Dazed, she crawled to the living room and lay there until Lida found her hours later. "Oh God, Tanyusha, you scared me. Why didn't you call? You have these pills. Have you taken them?" She panicked. Tatyana shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I didn't want to wake the neighbors." Lida stayed with her until she regained strength and helped her sit up. After that, she insisted on checking daily, cooking her lunch, even ironing her clothes. One icy November afternoon, Marina arrived at Tatyana's door with a large bag of groceries and a warm winter coat. She was a volunteer from the local charity, a tall young woman with earnest brown eyes, tied-back hair, and a kind smile. "Hello, Mrs. Mikhailovna. I'm Marina. We spoke on the phone last week. I'm here with your groceries." Tatyana invited her in. The door creaked on its hinges, and Marina stepped into a small corridor lined with coat hooks and a single umbrella. Inside, warmth and the smell of partially cooked soup awaited her. They sat at the table as Marina unpacked bread, potatoes, and a jar of honey. "Thank you. You're very kind." Marina smiled. "My mother is old, too. I know how hard it can be." A friendship formed. Each week, Marina would arrive, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just company. She brought soup, crafting supplies, and occasionally fresh cookies from a neighborhood bakery. Tatyana taught her to knit simple scarves, and in return, Marina shared stories of university life and her aspirations to become a social worker. One day, Marina brought a small cassette recorder. Tatyana was intrigued. "I thought maybe you might like to record some of your stories," Marina suggested. Tatyana hesitated, but then agreed. She recounted tales of her childhood in a small village, her first day at school, and meeting Viktor under the apple tree outside the church. Marina pressed record, capturing the gentle cadence of her voice. Tatyana's childhood village, Visoko, lay beyond fields of golden wheat. Her father was a carpenter, her mother a schoolteacher. She grew up barefoot in summer, chasing fireflies in the fields and helping her father shape wooden chairs. She remembered the smell of fresh-cut logs and her mother's laughter when she mispronounced words. Her brother Pavel was 3 years older. He taught her to swim in the icy river and to fish with a homemade rod. She remembered one summer when Pavel found a wounded wild dove and nursed it back to health. He named it Belka, and it flew away when healed, but not before nuzzling Tatyana's hand goodbye. She had been the village's pride, top of her class, bright-eyed and curious. Her father built her a small desk by the window so she could study by lamplight. But when Pavel left for the city to attend university, she felt a hollow ache, fearing she would follow him and leave the village behind. Viktor arrived in Vysoko as a young soldier on leave. He sought out the village's small church where Tatyana was helping her mother arrange books in the Sunday school library. He borrowed a prayer book and struck up a conversation, stumbling over words but captivated by her sincere eyes. Their courtship was simple: walks through the village lanes, shared pierogi at a roadside stand, and whispered conversations under the apple tree. On their wedding day, the entire village celebrated. Tatyana's mother sang folk songs and her father carved wooden spoons as keepsakes. They honeymooned in a nearby town, riding a steam train that chuffed along rustic tracks. Tatyana recalled the thrill of seeing her reflection in the window, glittering with tears of joy. In the early years of their marriage, Viktor's factory job relocated them to the city. The small apartment felt cramped, but it was theirs. Andrei arrived first, a round-cheeked boy who loved toy cars and asked endless questions about gears and wheels. 2 years later, Elena was born, a quiet baby swaddled in pink blankets. Tatyana took a part-time job at the local library, shelving books and reading stories to children. Meanwhile, Viktor tinkered with machines in his workshop on weekends, determined to invent something that would ease her life. Late at night, he'd show her blueprints for a simple water pump that could be built cheaply for rural houses. One winter, Andrei fell ill with pneumonia. Tatyana's world shrank to the hospital room where he lay unconscious, breathing through a mask. Viktor paced the hallway, refusing to leave until the doctors assured him his son would recover. When Andrei finally opened his eyes, he saw his mother sitting beside him, holding his hand. He mouthed, "Mama," and she wept tears of relief. Elena grew into a precocious child, always carrying a notebook to jot down thoughts. She asked questions about the world. Why do birds migrate? How do people live in faraway cities? Tatyana encouraged her curiosity, teaching her the alphabet and arithmetic at home. They spent summers in a small dacha outside the city. Viktor built it with his own hands, selecting each log, each nail. They planted sunflowers and strawberries, and Andrei delighted in chasing bumblebees, while Elena wrote poems by the lakeshore. On Viktor's 35th birthday, he unveiled his first working prototype, a hand-operated pump designed to draw water from shallow wells. It was clunky but functional. Village neighbors gathered in the courtyard, taking turns pumping water into pails, marveling at its efficiency. He dreamed of manufacturing it on a larger scale, but bureaucracy and limited resources blocked his path. Factories demanded exorbitant fees, and he lacked capital. Undeterred, he continued tinkering, refining his design and writing letters to distant relatives, hoping to secure funding. Despite setbacks, his optimism was infectious. Tatyana often peered at him in the workshop's dim light, marveling at his determination. She resolved to support him in any way she could. The fateful train accident came at a time when hope seemed within reach. A representative from a small engineering firm expressed interest in Viktor's pump, inviting him to bring his prototype to Moscow. Viktor, overjoyed, prepared to leave for the capital. On a snowy morning, as he drove to the train station, the brakes failed on the rural crossing. Viktor never stood to see his dream realized. Tatyana's grief was overwhelming. She stayed by his side in the hospital for hours after the crash, holding his hand, whispering that it was all right to rest. By the time she realized he was gone, he had already slipped away. His funeral drew a small crowd, neighbors, a few villagers who remembered his kindness, and close family friends. Andrei and Elena wore somber expressions far older than their years. As Viktor's casket descended, Tatyana felt as though her world had torn apart. She clutched her shawl, the scent of Viktor's pipe smoke lingering in her nostrils. After the funeral, they returned to the apartment. The workshop stood silent, bolts and wrenches scattered on the workbench like echoes of a life interrupted. Viktor's prototype sat under a dusty tarp, a silent testament to unfulfilled promise. Elena, barely 10, locked herself in her room and wrote, "Mama, why did he leave us?" Her young heart struggled to understand. The weeks that followed were bleak. Tatyana found herself unable to bear the sight of Viktor's side of the bed, so she slept on his quiet, folded jacket, clutching it as if he might return. Andrei retreated into himself, keeping silent during meals. Elena's notebooks filled with unspoken questions. Tatyana resumed her work at the library, but each book reminded her of Viktor's unfinished story. Neighbors offered condolences, but no one spoke of hope. Lida Petrovna, newly moved in on the floor above, circled around her like a concerned sparrow, bringing hot soup and gentle words. One December evening, as snow fell in thick flakes, Andrei emerged from his room and announced, "I have to go, Mama. I've been accepted to the engineering program in Petersburg." "You can't go," Tatyana whispered, tears in her eyes. He hugged her tightly. "I have to, for Papa's dream. I need to make it real." Elena shook her head, fists clenched. "And what about me? I have the poetry contest in Moscow next month. I'll never win without you there." Tatyana felt torn. Her children needed her, but they also needed to follow their own paths. She forced herself to smile and say, "You both must go. Live for Papa and me. We'll be all right." But she wasn't sure she believed it. Andrei in St. Petersburg. Andrei thrived in Petersburg's grand university halls. He excelled in classes, befriended mentors, and began refining Viktor's pump design using advanced materials. Letters home recounted academic triumphs, midnight study sessions, and the thrill of discovery. He met Irina, a medical student with a gentle smile and a caring demeanor. They married in a modest ceremony where Tatyana attended via phone. Her voice cracked as she congratulated them before the call ended abruptly due to poor reception. When Andrei's company offered him a position in Novosibirsk working on industrial machinery, he accepted without consulting Tatyana. He believed it was a step toward securing funding for Viktor's pump. He sent photographs of himself in a hard hat surrounded by colossal machines that dwarfed his childhood dreams. Elena in London. Elena's journalism career blossomed. She wrote for a bustling newsroom in London, chasing stories of culture, conflict, and human interest. Her baby, Natalia, became the light of her life. Michael's support was unwavering, yet Elena felt a tug in her heart crossing continents. She rarely called home, citing busy schedules and time differences. Once, she sent a package with a red winter coat for Tatyana, but it arrived 2 months late and was too big. Tatyana hung it by the door as decoration. Years passed. Tatyana's routine solidified. Morning tea, tending plants, church on Sundays. Once, when the priest recognized her, he offered a blessing, which she accepted with a meek nod. And evenings spent with old Soviet melodies on the radio. She waited for letters. Sometimes a short note arrived. "We're fine. Love you." But no details, no warmth. She tried calling Andrei on his birthday. It went to voicemail. She left a message. "Happy birthday, my dear. Mama loves you always." No reply. Lida urged her to travel to visit the grandchildren, but money was tight. The last time she tried to book a train ticket, the clerk looked at her jacket and said, "Listen, ma'am, subsidized tickets aren't available this month." She returned home ashamed. On a frigid February morning, Tatyana bundled in layers and braved the street to reach the pharmacy. The pavement was slick with ice. As she turned a corner, her foot slipped. She fell hard, the world tilting as her head struck the curb. Vision blurred. She tasted blood as the world dimmed. A passerby called for help. By the time the paramedics arrived, she was unconscious. In the hospital, she woke to a blinding white ceiling, a throbbing headache, and the scent of antiseptic. A nurse hovered over her. "You had quite a fall, Mrs. Mikhailovna. Concussion, minor fracture in your wrist. We'll keep you overnight for observation." She nodded weakly, eyes drifting to the window. She imagined Andrei finding her there, rushing into the ward, panic on his face, but no one came. In the morning, she asked for Marina. The nurse said Marina had visited the day before and promised to return soon. But Marina worked full-time and had tests to study for. Visits became bi-weekly. After the hospital discharged her, the staircase to her apartment loomed like a daunting challenge. Tatyana couldn't climb without pain. Lida and a social worker arranged for her to move into a municipal nursing home. She packed her belongings, a suitcase of clothes, Viktor's jacket, photo albums, and her knitting supplies. The nursing home building was institutional. Gray walls, narrow corridors, doors lining each side like jail cells. Tatyana's room was modest, a small bed, a bedside table, and a window overlooking a courtyard filled with swaying pines. She set up her space carefully. On the wall, she hung the wedding photo. On the bedside table, she placed a framed image of Andrei's graduation in engineering, a proud moment captured in a glossy print. Her roommate, Galina Sergeyevna, was a former schoolteacher who recognized Tatyana from the library years ago. They shared a small table where Galina knitted socks, and Tatyana recounted stories of her life. Marina visited when she could. She brought warm blankets, fresh fruit, and sometimes a recording of Tatyana's voice from the cassette tapes. The staff admired Tatyana's kindness. Even in sorrow, she offered compliments and small kindnesses. In a hidden corner of her room, Tatyana had a stack of unsent letters she'd started writing. Each began with Dear Andrei and Elena, and ended with love, Mom. They detailed her daily thoughts. The sight of a robin on a branch, the taste of raspberry compote, memories of Viktor's laughter, and her hope that someday they'd understand. One rainy afternoon, Galina discovered the letters. She read a few, eyes filling with tears. Why didn't you send these? Your children deserve to hear your voice, your love. You can still mail them. Tatyana shook her head. They never check. I don't want to burden them. Galina tore off a sheet from her notebook and wrote, Let me help. I'll send them. Every month, one letter. Tatyana hugged her. Exactly 6 months later, Elena received an envelope stamped with a Russian postmark. Inside was a letter in Tatyana's familiar handwriting. My precious children, I hope this finds you in good health and happiness. Life here is quiet. The leaves are turning gold, reminding me of the summers we spent at the Dasha. Papa would laugh as Andrei chased fireflies, and Elena would compose poems under the apple tree. I miss those days. I moved into a nursing home after a fall. Please, don't worry, I am well taken care of, but I long to hear your voices, to see you again. If you can find the time, come visit. Andrei, I know you're busy with work. Elena, I understand you're raising Natalia, but a moment together would mean more than words can say. Always your loving mother, Tatyana. Elena's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision as she reread the letter. She confronted Michael. Why didn't you manage a ticket sooner? Mama's in a nursing home and she wants to see me. Michael's face softened. I'm sorry. I thought you had time. Flights are booked until February. We can't make it sooner, but I'll rearrange things. Elena nodded, guilt tightening her chest. With tickets secured for the next month, Elena left Natalia with Michael's parents and boarded a flight to Moscow. In her heart, she carried guilt and regret as heavy as her suitcase. Meanwhile, Andrei received a letter from the nursing home. He paused in his factory office in Novosibirsk, reading his mother's plea. He closed his laptop, hands trembling, and booked a flight within hours. Elena and Andrei arrived in Moscow on the same gray morning, each unaware of the other's presence. They took separate trains to the nursing home in Tatyana's city. Elena pushed open the nursing home's front door. The smell of antiseptic stung her nostrils as she climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. She found Tatyana in the common room, seated by a window, the autumn light striking her silver hair. Tatyana's eyes brightened as Elena approached. She attempted to stand, but wobbled. Elena caught her, tears streaming. Mama, I'm here. I'm so sorry. Tatyana reached out, touching Elena's cheek softly. My darling. I waited. I always waited. At that moment, Andrei entered, silent and imposing. When he saw his mother, he dropped his bag, knelt, and grasped her hand. Mama, forgive me. I should have come sooner. Tatyana placed a frail hand on his cheek. My son, you're here now. That's what matters. They gathered around her, memories and regrets swirling. For 7 days, siblings took turns caring for Tatyana. Elena prepared her favorite breakfast, oatmeal with honey and cinnamon. Andrei helped bathe her and massage her arthritic knees. They shared stories of their lives. Andrei spoke of factory upgrades and the halfway completion of Viktor's pump prototype. Elena described London's rainy streets, Natalia's first steps, and Michael's recent promotion. Each evening, they gathered around a small radio listening to a folk quartet that reminded their mother of home. Under the soft glow of a single lamp, they shared laughter and tears. On Thursday, Marina visited with a small bouquet of asters and brought Tatyana's recorded tapes. They listened to her younger voice recounting village memories. Elena cried to hear her mother's unbroken voice, and Andrei pressed the cassette gently as though it were a fragile relic. Lyda Petrovna stopped by, bringing a homemade apple pie. She sat quietly in a corner, observing the reunion with a warm smile. After Tatyana's health improved slightly, Andrei and Elena arranged to move her back into her apartment. They spent 2 weekends clearing out the dusty rooms. The peeling wallpaper remained, but they painted over it with soft pastel shades. Furniture creaked as they cleaned, dust motes dancing in the slanted sunlight. They repaired the leaky roof and fixed the bathroom. Andrei installed a modern pump based on Viktor's design, ensuring fresh water without struggle. Elena placed family portraits on the mantel. The apartment breathed again. In the small balcony garden, they replanted petunias and basil in fresh soil. Under the birch tree, they cleared weeds and set a comfortable chair where Tatyana could sit. Elena extended her stay for a month, arranging remote work from Russia. She enrolled Natalia in a local preschool for a week, introducing her to her grandmother's homeland. Natalia clung to Tatyana, babbling "Baba, Baba," as they fed pigeons in the courtyard. Andrei, between business trips, visited on weekends. He brought blueprints for Viktor's pump and invited 2 local engineers to collaborate on a small manufacturing endeavor. He invited Marina to consult on community outreach, hoping to honor his father's dream. Lida continued regular visits, baking pies, and sharing local gossip. Tatyana felt enveloped by a network of love she had long forgotten. Every Sunday, the family gathered at Tatyana's apartment. Elena and Natalia sang old Russian lullabies, while Andrei and Tatyana knitted together on the balcony. Lida brought her homemade pies, and Marina joined when she could, now a trusted friend. Andrei proposed building a small community center in memory of his parents, a place where elderly could gather, tell stories, and learn skills. Elena vowed to document its opening, traveling with Natalia to record the event. Tatyana felt a sense of purpose she had not known in years. She started teaching Sunday reading sessions in the center, sharing her mother's old school books with eager listeners. Years later, as Tatyana's hair turned whiter and her steps slower, the apartment remained a beacon of warmth. Children in the neighborhood called her Grandma Tasha, and she kept fresh peppermint candies in a jar on her bedside. Andrei and Irina welcomed their own child, a son named Viktor, in honor of his grandfather. Natalia visited with Elena and Michael every summer, her English accent mixing with the soft Russian lullabies. On Tatyana's 80th birthday, the community center was officially inaugurated in her name. The plaque read, "Tatyana Mikhailovna, mother, grandmother, storyteller, and friend." Lida and Marina stood by her side, and Andrei wiped a tear as he spoke on the microphone. Elena recorded the moment, capturing Tatyana's gentle smile. As the crowd dispersed, Tatyana sat on the bench under the birch tree in her balcony garden. She whispered to the wind, "Thank you, Viktor. We did it." And a leaf drifted down, settling softly on her hand. Tatyana's final years were filled with moments of quiet contentment. She watched her grandchildren grow, shared stories with young mothers, and tended her balcony flowers, now thriving in fresh soil. She wrote a memoir with Marina's assistance, recounting her life from Vysoko to the city, from Viktor's dreams to her children's rediscovery. On a peaceful autumn afternoon, Tatyana passed away in her sleep at the nursing home she once feared. The community mourned, but her legacy endured. The pump provided water to dozens of villages, the community center buzzed with activity, and her memoir, published posthumously, became required reading in local schools. Elena placed a newly published copy of the book in her mother's favorite spot on the shelf and whispered, "We remember you, Mom." And in the hush of the library, Tatyana's voice continued, bridging generations with tales of love, loss, and redemption.